I'm Kaylee, and today I'm going to be ranking all of the classics that I read in 2021. My goal in 2021 was to read at least 12 classics, and I completely surpassed that. I actually ended up reading 32 classics and 33 modern classics. In case you couldn't tell, I super love classics. Before we dive in, we're gonna reach back here to our Booktuber Shoutout book, and we're gonna shout out somebody randomly. Today's shout out goes to Ray of Sunlight. I will link their channel down below, so be sure to go over and subscribe to them. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe to this channel and give this video a big thumbs up if you love classics as much as I do. So I'm going to be dividing up this ranking into the classics that I read and the modern classics that I read. And for me, that cutoff date is 1914, the beginning of World War I. Anything written after 1914 is a modern classic in my mind, and anything before that deserves the title of classic. So first, let's do some modern classics. Unfortunately, right at the bottom of this list is 12 Girls in the Garden. This was a fine book. I gave it 3 stars. I enjoyed it. It was a fun little mystery, but there was just other stuff that was better. Then we have 2 that I kind of think of together. It's The Frenzied Prince, Heroic Stories of Ancient Ireland, and Welsh Legendary Tales. These both had such a similar vibe of telling these old, almost fairy tale kind of legends. These were both really interesting. They're totally different authors and different countries and everything, but they had such a similar, just kind of a mood to them that I think of them as if they were together. Next on the list, we have Bambi. This one, I don't know, I had kind of mixed feelings about. It was really well written and really good and had some dark themes in there and everything, but it was certainly interesting. Then we have The 21 Balloons. This is one of my favorites that I think I've reread it 3 times now. The big thing about this one is the world building. Most of the story, there's not really much of a story there. There's not really much of a plot. It's just descriptions of this town and descriptions of the people and how they live and where they get their food and what they do for fun. The world building kind of is the book, but there's just not really much of a plot. Then we have Christmas with Anne. These are very sweet, adorable stories. Some of them actually feature Anne Shirley, and others of them are just other Christmassy stories, but all of them are like so sweetsy, just so cute. And if you're in the mood for cute, then great. But if not, they just come across as like a little too much. Then we have C.S. Lewis's The Abolition of Man. Normally, C.S. Lewis would be really high on any list, any rankings that I'm doing. However, this one, it just felt like Lewis was writing this essay as an answer to other colleagues or like other scholars of the day. And if you kind of didn't already know the arguments that were already happening and different papers that other people had published on the subject, then it's sort of like when you read his answer to their ideas, it's easy to get kind of lost. I'd just be like, this feels like it's something just very specific geared towards this particular area of scholarship. And it's just like, I felt a little lost in there. Then we have How Do You Live? This is an amazing Japanese classic that I really did enjoy, but it has these long chapters that are more just kind of like educational. It goes on about science and history and art and different things, and then it all kind of does sort of dovetail back to the main story. But you sort of have to slog through these long educational chapters. And those parts were good, but it's like, I just kept feeling like, can we please get back to the main story? I want the main story, please. Then we have Mistress Masham's Repose. I think this is my 4th or 5th time rereading this one. It's a story about a little girl who discovers that there are Lilliputians living in England. It's just adorable and sweet and has one of the most complex child characters that in all of children's literature. However, rereading it through this time, I think I was kind of able to see a few more of the flaws in the story and everything. So I don't know, this is one of the few very rare instances when I reread a childhood favorite and then find that upon rereading it the 4th or 5th time, I am not enjoying it as much as I did before. Then we have Bilbo's Last Song. This is a beautifully illustrated poem that Bilbo wrote kind of as a farewell to Middle-earth. The real draw with this one is just the beautiful, beautiful illustrations. It's just so gorgeous. And it's just the one poem, like there's like 4 lines on each page or something, but it's really beautifully designed with all of that lovely illustration and everything, so it's just gorgeous. Then I'm just kind of putting together in one big lump the Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis. So it's Out of the Silent Planet, Paralandra, and That Hideous Strength. Of those 3, I like Out of the Silent Planet a lot more than the other 2, but I'm just kind of lumping them all together near the top of this list. I do love C.S. Lewis. Sometimes he kind of goes on these tangents, and sometimes his plots don't always fit. But his writing is so powerful, and his stories are so imaginative, and he just takes these themes in different directions that you never imagined. C.S. Lewis is always amazing. And right near the top of my modern classics list is The Secret of Ronmore Skerry. I had some apprehension coming into this book because I love the movie, The Secret of Rowan Inish. And so I was worried that the book would not have the same kind of charm and just a beautiful enchantment and legends and everything that the movie did, but I was not disappointed. This book, well, it made it to the top of this list. I mean, my goodness. It is just so charming, so lovely. It just drew me into this beautiful world of Selkies and legends and history. And I really can't even describe just the enchantment of like these beautiful Irish legends and everything. And it's beautifully illustrated as well, and I just fell in love with this story all over again. So right at the very, very top of my modern classics list, I'm just gonna lump together all of the 18 Agatha Christie books that I read. I have already done a whole other video ranking all of my Agatha Christie reading from 2021. So of course you can go over there to see individually which Agatha Christie ended up being my very favorite Agatha Christie of the year. But for the purposes of this list, I'm just gonna kind of lump them all together. I just read so many great Agatha Christie books. I really, really enjoyed it so much. So the #1 slot for modern classics just goes to Agatha Christie. And now let's dive into the old classics. Down at number 32, we have The Mysterious Stranger and Other Stories by Mark Twain. The Mysterious Stranger is an uncompleted manuscript, and Mark Twain himself said that it was unpublishable, and I agree with him. That should never have been published. It's terrible. And a lot of the other Mark Twain stories that were in this collection, I don't know, I just didn't enjoy them that much. I don't know if the humor just wasn't my thing. I don't know. Normally, I really like Mark Twain, but somehow this particular collection of his short stories just was not my cup of tea. Then down at number 31 is The Man Who Would Be King, a short story by Rudyard Kipling. Usually I love Kipling. I mean, I just adore his books. I grew up reading The Jungle Book. I love Rudyard Kipling, but somehow this particular story just left me like, I don't even care about that. Then at number 30, we have Lord Byron's poetry. Lord Byron is kind of hit or miss for me. Sometimes I will just super love his poems, and then other times I'm just like, what? You lost me. What are you even talking about? You've gone off on some rabbit trail and I don't even know what the subject material is anymore. He also tends to make a lot of historical references to stuff that have kind of been lost to history. Like it's not common knowledge anymore. It was common knowledge when he was writing, but it's not now. And so it's just like, if you don't know, then you don't know. And then you don't know what he's talking about. Some people are not gonna like this next one. Number 29 is Wuthering Heights. Oh dear. I participated in the Wuthering Heights read along, and it was so interesting to see how everybody else loved it and I did not. This is my second time reading Wuthering Heights, and every character is so unlikable. Everyone is so horrible and they make terrible decisions, and I hated everyone. I hated every bit of it. It's just so dark and violent. There's no one to root for. There's no one to cheer for. And I have to have at least one character that I can say, I'm on your side. I want you to win. I have done a whole other video about why I didn't like Wuthering Heights in lots of lovely detail. So go over and check that out if you want to hear more about Wuthering Heights. The next one is Emma Brown. This is from an unfinished manuscript by Charlotte Bronte, and a modern author tried to finish it So I'm kind of like, I don't really know whether to put it in with the modern classics or the old classics. It's in the old classics, so whatever. This modern author tried to imitate Charlotte Bronte's style, and I just don't feel like they did a very good job at it, and yeah, that's kind of that. Oh well. Then I read Sentimental Tommy by J.M. Barrie, the author of Peter Pan, and I really did not like the main character. Tommy is selfish and mean, and he's just like innocently cruel when he doesn't even realize how he's causing the people around him pain. And he's just la-di-da through life and doesn't even care and doesn't even notice that, like, your actions are hurting others, you idiot. I got so frustrated with Tommy, so just no. Number 26 is The Island of Dr. Moreau. It was fine, it was good, but I think when you kind of already know the premise and you already know the basic story, you know, and like what's the secret on the island, then it loses all of its suspense. It just didn't seem like there was a lot there in the plot other than that big main thing, if you know what the main plot is. It was fine, but it's just kind of in the middle-ish. At number 25, we have a graphic novel of The Secret Garden. The Secret Garden is one of my favorite books. I have reread it and reread it over and over and over and over and over and over, and I love it every time. I never get tired of reading The Secret Garden. So I had high hopes for this graphic novel, but they kind of watered down the story. And I just felt like if this was your first time reading The Secret Garden and you read it through this graphic novel, you're not getting the main thing. It's really beautifully illustrated, just wonderful, lovely artwork. But I don't know, something in like the core enchantment of this book was just lost. I also read Making of a Marchioness, well, if it's Marquis, it would be Marchioness, right? I don't know. Who knows, man? I don't know. This one, I love the writing style. This is one of my favorite authors, but the story just took this really weird turn, and the characters, it was just like, what? Why would you, what? No, I couldn't understand the decisions the characters made. Just like, why would you do that? I don't understand your motivation, or like, what is wrong with your personality that this is what you decided was a good idea to do? I don't know. But it does have a very charming, sweet, old-fashioned writing style, which I do love. So another one that's just sort of in the middle-ish. At number 23, we have poems by Currer, Acton, and Alice Bell. This is Charlotte, Anne, and Emily Bronte. I liked some of the poems, but so many of them are really dark. They're all about death and depression and being alone and dying. And it was just making me depressed, you know? So the few poems that were a little more lighthearted, I really enjoyed. Then we have a short story by Hans Christian Andersen, The Robin and the Fir Tree. This particular edition was so beautifully illustrated. It was really lovely. I do enjoy fairy tales and Hans Christian Andersen and everything. This one is not particularly my favorite fairy tale, but just for the illustrations, it's a little higher up on this list. I also read Early Days by Miss Reed. This is an autobiography of her young childhood. It was just really interesting to see how people lived back in history and the type of toys they had and the schools she went to and the little shenanigans that she and her friends would get up to. It was just so adorable and charming. It was just this slice of life from history. It was very simple, and it was absolutely lovely. Then we have Cornelli. This is by the same author who wrote Heidi. This is about a little girl who doesn't really have many friends, and then a young boy befriends her, and their whole family just kind of takes her in and basically adopts her, even though she has her own family. This was just really sweet. It was just so wholesome and innocent and lovely. I don't know, it was just very heartwarming. This book was just so heartwarming. I also read a manga of Frankenstein, and even though it's a manga, I am including it with these old classics because it uses almost all the exact same dialogue and narrative, everything from the original novel of Frankenstein. It's basically just like reading the original novel, but it's illustrated. I have read the novel of Frankenstein, and so then reading the manga was really interesting to just see it kind of all brought to life. It was more horrifying, you know, reading this manga than it was reading the novel. The novel didn't really scare me. It was just like, ooh, chilling, but it wasn't too bad. But the manga was actually like, oh my goodness, this is about to give me nightmares. Maybe just seeing the monster, you know, Adam the monster, that really made the difference. It's already such a powerful novel, and seeing it in manga form was just like really, really mind-blowing. I read 2 novels from L. Frank Baum from the Aunt Jane's Nieces series, Aunt Jane's Nieces on Vacation, and Aunt Jane's Nieces and Uncle John. I adore Aunt Jane's Nieces. They're just so cute and adorable. If you like stuff like Little Women, then you would probably like Aunt Jane's Nieces. They have little adventures and little this and that going on in their lives. Both of these, particularly in the series, have really excellent plots. Just there's some sort of mystery or some sort of adventure and things going on. It has a really lovely, charming writing style. It's just good, wholesome fun. Number 16 is Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. I think I had higher expectations for this one, and then when the story structure kind of went in a different direction from what I thought that it was going to, then I was kind of like, oh, that was it? Oh, well, okay, that's good too. So I did enjoy Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm, and I loved the wholesome, adorable writing style and everything. And of course, Rebecca herself is so cute and lovely. But the whole time I was kind of like, oh, wait, what? This is what's happening now? Oh, okay, I guess. I guess it kind of took me by surprise or something. I don't know. I also read the manga of Macbeth. This one would be higher on the list, except the 3 witches, the 3 fates, really creeped me out. Their faces are just so freaky. It actually just kind of really creeped me out. I don't know. I mean, Macbeth is a very dark play, and there's a lot of creepy elements in it. My personal experience was that I did not enjoy it being quite so dark and quite so creepy. But if you're looking for something dark and creepy, and you like Shakespeare, then this would be perfect. Really, this one ought to be higher on the list. It's just, I'm not much for the dark and creepy. Then we have 5 Children in It by Edith Nesbit. This is one of my favorite books to reread. I think this is probably my 10th or 11th time reading it. I just love it. It's got the magic, it's got the charm. These children make wishes, and of course all their wishes go wrong because they wish for the most idiotic things. It's completely adorable. Then we have the Emily of New Moon trilogy, Emily of New Moon, Emily Climbs, and Emily's Quest. This is probably my 5th or 6th time rereading the Emily series. I first started reading it when I was a teenager, and I just kind of reread it every few years over and over, and I just love Ellen Montgomery. If you've read Anne of Green Gables, you would definitely like Emily. Then I read another couple of manga. I read Romeo and Juliet. Now this one was the modern English version, but I was very impressed with the way it was almost like it was translated from Elizabethan English into modern English, but most of the same sentence structure, the same wording, all of that is still intact. So it really did just feel like, oh, I'm still reading Shakespeare. It's been slightly modernized. I loved it so much. I love it. I love it. And I also read Othello, and I just love these manga classics. They're so beautifully constructed. The artwork is so gorgeous, and it really keeps the integrity of the original text, and it is just fantastic. All right, now we're getting up to the top of this list. Number 8 is Cousin Phyllis and Other Tales. This is a collection of short stories by Elizabeth Gaskell, and I really, really liked these. There is something so powerful about Gaskell's writing where she just pulls you in with these characters and these intricate relationships between people. Each of these stories really, really, I don't know, they just kind of drew me in and had a big impact on me. Number 7 is Knock 3 Times. This is another favorite children's classic that I reread over and over and over. This one is just so imaginative and magical. These 2 children find a door into another magical kingdom, and they have to defeat the evil gray pumpkin. And it's just so much fun. And number 6 is Les Mis. I participated in a read-along of Les Mis this year, and I just really enjoyed it a lot. The author does tend to take these really long rabbit trails into like these lengthy, like 6-chapter rabbit trails of history, or like how the sewers beneath Paris work, and like all kinds of insane stuff that's just like, can we get back to the story, please? And I think I wouldn't have minded those flights into history quite so much if he hadn't done it right at like a cliffhanger moment in the plot. Like, everybody's about to die. Let me stop and tell you about the sewers beneath Paris. Or maybe like, our characters are running for their lives. Let me stop and tell you about the history of nuns and monks and monasteries in France. He chose the worst possible moments to put in all of these descriptive things about history. But other than that, I really enjoyed Les Mis. The actual story itself is so powerful and just so emotional and interesting. It's really, really beautiful. Number 5 is Dr. Wardhall's School by Anthony Trollope. I am just getting to the point where Anthony Trollope is really one of my favorite authors. He writes such amazing characters where they're so intricate and they have such intricate relationships with one another. And then something happens in the plot and you have to see how it affects each person. It's almost like these puzzle pieces of characters. All of his characters are so complex. And there's always some kind of element of mystery or some sort of small adventure or some sort of action in the story as well that really kicks things off. Numbers 3 and 4 are 8 Cousins and Rose in Bloom. I love this duology from Louisa May Alcott. I think I probably love 8 Cousins more than I love Little Women. It's about Rose, who has 7 boy cousins, and they are just kind of overwhelming. They are a lot. They are loud, and they're running around all the time. And it's just such an adorable family story. It's all about this close-knit family of aunts and uncles and cousins. There's just something really heartwarming and really touching about this story every time I reread it. I just love it more and more. Number 2, I know I just said that I think I love 8 Cousins more than Little Women, but number 2 for this year is Mujercitas, Little Women in Spanish. I think the reason this one won over 8 Cousins for this year is because rereading it in Spanish this time was almost like rediscovering the whole series again, like brand new. I just fell in love with Meg and Joe and Amy, you know, all over again, but in a new language. It was such a wonderful experience, and part of the time I read it and part of the time I listened to an audiobook, and I think that is kind of what put it over the top and put it at number 2 on my list. And now we have my very top number 1 classic of all time that I read in 2021. And that was Jane Austen's Persuasion. As part of Jane Austen July, I reread Persuasion. This is probably my 4th or 5th time rereading Persuasion now. And I just loved it more and more. Every time I read it, I see something new. I see something more complex in the characters. I see, you know, just some other aspect of the plot or the relationships between the characters that I just never considered before. Or maybe there's something like in the history of that time period that I had never considered before or that I didn't know the last time that I read it. And so then this time it gives me like this whole new perspective on what is going on and what this means to the characters. It was just so phenomenal rereading Persuasion this year. Every time I reread a Jane Austen, I just fall in love with it more and more. And those are the 32 classics and the 33 modern classics that I read in 2021. Please leave me a comment down below and let me know what is one of your favorite classics that you read this past year. If you like this video, you might enjoy my video about my top 5 favorite classics of all time, not just this past year, but of all time. I will leave a link up above and down below so you can go over and watch that video if you like. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and remember, the right book in the right hands at the right time can change the world.